Hey everybody, Allison Morrow here. Thanks for checking out this video on how to stay healthy with the coronavirus spreading in the US. And we're really lucky today. We're talking to Dr. David Ramaley of Seattle Natural Health about boosting our immune system and just being generally healthy, which is a huge part of the reason that my husband and I are making this move sort of off-gridish, renovating the Airstream. So without further ado, here we go.
We are in Clearwater tonight. I'm Allison Morrow.
Hi, I'm Allison Morrow.
I'm Allison Morrow.
And I've gone to a lot of places.
On St. Pete Beach, Allison Morrow.
And now with my former Force Recon Marine husband, I'm going off-grid-ish.
So the first thing I want to show you is the latest that came out of King County, Washington today, where we now have 6 confirmed deaths from coronavirus, all basically in the same area at a senior care facility. Older people with compromised immune systems. But this is an interesting part of it. The public health official who's been doing a lot of these press conferences explaining that these cases aren't necessarily happening right now. They are being tested right now, and they may have been around for a while. So take a listen to this.
We're now identifying patients that weren't able to have been tested before. So I don't want you to get the impression that there's these cases are necessarily occurring right now. They're being tested right now. So they have probably been occurring for a while. And as you know, we haven't had the ability to test for mild cases.
All right, so Dr. David Ramaley, again, Seattle Natural Health. What we basically just heard from this doctor is that they haven't had the ability to test these cases up until now. Of course, with the state of emergency declared in Washington by Governor Inslee, now they're opening up all of these laboratories to start doing the testing, which means we're probably going to see more cases. So I want to just start there with you. How do we think through this? Because it's easy to think, oh my gosh, it's just spreading like wildfire because new cases every day. But like this man said, they could have been around for a long time. We just didn't know it.
I would totally agree with that. I mean, how do we know that the coronavirus hasn't been here unless we're testing for it? And it's called a Pcr test. That's how they're finding out whether someone has that or not. And it's a very, very specific test to COVID-19. So we don't know whether it's been here for the last 50 years or 30 years. And generally when someone dies of what's called the flu, they're not checking to see how many people actually die of like which particular viral strain. So if we had actually tested all, let's just say 380 million people in the United States, with the COVID-19 test, we may find that there's been millions and millions of people that have it. We just don't test for it, so we really don't know. I think that's the point that the CDC and other people have been saying, is that we just really don't know because we haven't tested for it. So the fact that 6 people have died is we don't know whether that's a high mortality rate or not because we don't know how many cases there are. There could be millions of cases out there, so then that mortality rate is actually low. So that's been the confusion on it.
And I think probably that's where some of this hysteria comes from, because there is so much that is unknown. And like a friend of mine sent a picture, actually I think we have it here, of the grocery store. This is actually Bartell's drugstore with an aisle just missing thermometers because people are just running to the store to get thermometers. You said that you saw milk missing and, just aisles that people are running to Costco preparing for an emergency. And I wanted to give people just a different opportunity to think through this than what they're normally seeing, because all we're really hearing is, well, first off, we don't know, we're tracking it, we have a state of emergency, but also like the only thing they get for how can I make my chances better with this is like wash your hands, don't put your fingers in your mouth if you haven't washed your hands. I kind of stay away from people that might be sick. But since you're a naturopathic physician, you deal in large part with how to keep people's immune systems functioning very robustly. And since that seems to be the make or break with this virus, as it is with many viruses, I wanted to give you an opportunity to give people just a little more information that's in depth on what they can do to stay healthy through this, since that seems to be what makes the difference with lots of diseases, not just this one.
I'll get to that in a second, but I just want to put this in a little bit of a context. We're looking at the coronavirus. We could be having front page headlines on the norovirus. And how many people go, I've never really heard of the norovirus. The other thing is that the leading cause of death in the world, including almost the United States now, is sepsis, which is an infection of the blood. And if you get that, it's about a 30% mortality rate. And sepsis is growing in the United States, but no one's really hearing about it. I mean, how many people hear about that? But that's killing more people than probably heart disease and cancer. The reason why we don't hear about it is because there's no pharmacological treatment for it at the moment. IV vitamin C is great, but this is a little bit more of, I don't want to say the darker side, but if there's not a drug to sell, often it doesn't make the front page news because there is no really conventional treatment for sepsis. But that's a lot of people dying. It's the number one killer in the world right now, but we don't hear about that. And I say it's the same for the norovirus. There's no vaccine for it. They don't really have a treatment, so we don't really hear about it. There's more people dying of norovirus than we're probably ever going to see of the COVID-19 here in the United States. So it isn't to dismiss the COVID-19 or the coronavirus, but it's just to put into a greater perspective of what's happening. So that's why I think we can kind of let some of that fear at least go away a little bit, but we want to keep a watchful eye on this, right? But we don't want to blow it out of proportion.
Right, and real fast, just so that people know the latest statistics, I was just looking up like this compared to the flu, because of course that's what a lot of people are saying. In fact, the public health officials in King County are saying this is a bad flu, essentially. And I just looked up before we started this video, we have about 3 million flu cases a year in the U.S., with about 56,000 deaths. That's a pretty normal year, apparently. So far, we've seen 89,000 infected globally from this virus, and a mortality of about 3,000. Again, in Washington, 6 deaths as of today, which is Monday, March 2nd, I believe. And Dave, as far as like our cases here, we've heard now there's some in Florida. So, there are people now across the country. It's not just a West Coast issue that we're dealing with. And like you heard from the guy who talked with the public health, as we do more testing, we're probably going to see more. When you think about how people are responding to this, where do you, when we're tempering, we say temper this hysteria or like a reaction to it. I mean, say scale 1 to 10, 10, you're just like, you're moving into a cave in the middle of nowhere. You're never talking to anybody ever again. 0 is you're like me and you're eating still out of the community popcorn bowl at the hardware store. Where do you put, like, where are you, I guess, on that spectrum?
Well, like I said, I don't want to dismiss this, and I know the CDC, and I totally appreciate what the Department of Health is, everything what they're doing. So it's not a criticism of that. It's just that, again, we don't want to overreact to something that isn't really there. So still going back to the same presupposition that doctor said is that, so we have 6 confirmed deaths, but how do we know that when someone dies of the flu, like I said, there's only a very, very small percentage where they actually do a test to see what that person died of. They just say you died of the flu. So for all we know, 3,000 people could have died of the coronavirus last year. And we just have absolutely no idea. So I just I would kind of draw back and say, well, it's still the flu, it's still a virus. So how do we protect ourselves, whether it's COVID, whether it's SARS, whether it's, MERS, whether it's, H1N1, and we could go on and name all the different flus and viruses. But the reality is, it's still the flu. It's still a virus. So how do we protect ourselves, and how do we make our health systems, our health even stronger? And, I was going to say one key point about, a virus. People think that they actually die of a virus, right? Even if you're looking at Ebola, if someone, let's say, gets a, strep infection of their throat, people don't actually die of the virus. It sounds crazy, but you don't actually die of the infection. You die from the inflammatory process. And the reason why that's important is because if we think that's what we're actually dying of, then let's look at how we bring down inflammation in our body, right? Time magazine, everybody says, what's the number one killer in the United States is inflammation. That's literally what sepsis is of the blood. It's an inflammatory process that can't be stopped. And so every virus, every flu is that inflammatory process. So let's look at our body and say, okay, what if we get the flu? How do we bring down that inflammatory process? And so it doesn't really matter the exact organism. It's just how do we keep our bodies strong and healthy?
And interestingly, I've seen some people say, I'm really scared because I have kids. But actually, I haven't seen any cases of kids recorded getting really sick from this. It all seems to be basically people over the age of 50, and the mortality is over the age of 60. So why does that play into it? I mean, why is it you get older? When you usually hear compromised immune systems, kids are often included in that category. Any thoughts on why this seems to be something that's only affecting elderly people?
I think for sure. Well, if you look at the cases, right, of the 6 people who died, now I don't know every single case, but I know the 50-year-old and someone else, they all had underlying health conditions, right? So what that's really saying is their body is inflamed. Most likely the elderly become dehydrated, so they don't have the water that they need inside of them to actually make their body function. And if you even look in Wuhan, in the city, right, that is the 30th most polluted city in the world, the fourth most polluted in China. And they've actually had demonstrations in that city before because of the amount of pollution that the people suffer from. So there's a very high degree of, COPD or some of these, respiratory diseases, emphysema. So it's really high in that city. So it's kind of hard to look at that segment of the population, say all these older people have these respiratory diseases, they have a lot of congestive heart failure because of the pollution. Now, what would that look like in an area where they didn't have that? And so that's what we'll have to see. I can almost guarantee you that everyone who died here in Washington State all had other underlying health conditions.
Okay, so let's get to the reason why I'm sure everybody's watching. What do we do at this
What do you
point?
do?
Yeah, what do we do? Help us.
Okay, well, I would keep the inflammation down. So here's the first thing I would do. Every 10 years they do these nutritional studies in the United States, and they found that 50% of the population of the United States does not have enough vitamin A. And that's actually that's called the RDA, like that's the minimum, so you basically don't kill over and die, right? So 50% don't even have that amount. Now, the thing about vitamin A, so they say wash your hands, don't sneeze, out in the open, cover your mouth. But vitamin A is incredible. It's one of the strongest antiviral vitamins there is. And so I would have people definitely keep their vitamin A up. And if they do get sick, we have like a whole protocol using vitamin A. So I can talk a little bit about what kinds of vitamin A and how to take that. So especially if you're a vegetarian, if you don't eat, vitamin A is primarily found in organ meat. So unless you're chomping down a bunch of kidney, heart, and liver, which I doubt anybody is, most people are going to be a little bit low in vitamin A. So unless you're going to go out and start eating a lot of organ meat or fish, I would suggest taking some vitamin A, and I'd be doing about, at least for the flu season, about 10,000 IUs a day. Now, one thing I want to make clear on the vitamin A, it has to be from a fish source or vitamin A palmitate. And so when I say from a fish source, that doesn't mean fish oil. It'll still say vitamin A on it, but it will say from fish, or it'll say vitamin A palmitate. If it says vitamin A from beta carotene is not vitamin A, and most people have a really hard time converting beta carotene into vitamin A. So vegetarians are going to be, or especially if they're eating no animal sources whatsoever, like butter or eggs, they're going to be very low in vitamin A. So that's the first thing I would tell anybody, is to start doing about 10,000 IUs of vitamin A a day from those sources. Now, I want to make very clear, I'm not giving medical advice to anyone, all right? So this is not telling you to start doing this if you have any problems. If you're pregnant, you don't want to do this. But if you're sick, what you could do is take about 75,000 IUs of this vitamin A 3 times a day for 4 days. And they found in studies in children in Africa that get measles, if they give them 300,000 IUs of vitamin A, just one dose, it decreases the measles rates by 50%.
Wow, that's
and
incredible.
They can decrease it by 30 by giving vitamin A, like 100,000 IUs of vitamin A 2 times a year. I'll get this, 2 times a year. They can lower the overall mortality rate in children from malaria and other infections by 50%. Now, we're spending billions on vaccines and everything else, all these medicines for the third world, but so many studies show just very simple amounts of vitamin A will actually help them recover from a virus. It's such a simple solution. It's pennies. It costs almost nothing. And the way that vitamin A works is it stops the viral replication. So when a virus comes into our body, it's different than a bacteria. The only way it can replicate or actually make you sick is it has to actually get inside of your cell itself, and that's how it starts replicating. It starts replicating its own DNA. But vitamin A actually goes in there and stops the replication of it. So vitamin A is very cool. It's an amazing vitamin, and we could be using that. So to be on the safe side, 10,000 IUs through the flu season works really well.
We have some questions from people when I post this on Facebook. Do you want to take some of those, or would you like to give some more tips? Go to the questions.
Yeah, whatever
Okay,
works.
well, so we'll do one of those. Pam Miller says, given the lack of adequate, read unreliable testing protocols, which I don't know if they're unreliable or inadequate, but how do we determine if we have the coronavirus, a bad cold, or another type of flu? Others have asked, but I'll reiterate, what to take to boost immunity in addition to zinc or to lessen the severity. And she says, finally, thank you for talking to a naturopathic doctor. They play an important role in our health. So you already kind of
All
covered a
right.
little bit of that. But yeah, I mean, I guess people are asking, like, how do we know if it's serious enough that it could be this? And, we should blockade ourselves in the house or we should go to the emergency room. I think that's kind of what
Right,
she's
right,
getting
right.
at, because it sounds like if they test you for it, they'll figure it out. It's not the testing that's inadequate. It's just we don't have enough to go around to test very quickly. And so people are wondering, how do they know if they have it?
Right. Well, you don't actually really know. The only way they can say is that maybe you don't have as much of a runny nose and it's maybe more of a dry cough. But those are not like black and white. I mean, that everybody's going to present differently. So that is part of the problem. That's what they're talking about the testing. How do we really know? So the only definitive way is to go get the test, and it's called a PCR test. There's different kinds of testing that you can do for bacteria, but for a virus, like the main thing, and that's the kits that they're circulating around. It's called a PCR test. And you'd have to go in, I guess, to your doctor or clinic. They're finally releasing them out into the public. It was only the departments of health that actually held this test, but evidently it's getting out more and more. That's the only way you would really know.
Okay, we have a question from Margaret Douglas. Do our emotions affect immunity levels? So if you're freaking out right now, do you
Absolutely.
have a more of a chance to get the virus?
Yeah, well, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I think everybody knows that, right? If they're feeling depressed, obviously you're going to be more susceptible. We all know that when we start laughing, our immune systems get a huge burst of white blood cell activity. I think it's going back to also just to kind of like this whole paranoia of the coronavirus. The more that we believe that it's a real threat to us, the more that I think we're just susceptible to it. And again, I want to totally dismiss it. We just got to put it in some kind of a context. So I honestly believe that if we think that we're healthy and we laugh and try to keep a good attitude, that will definitely help.
I think also when people feel overwhelmed and powerless, in the sort of pandemonium, then they tend to, in a lot of cases, just do nothing because they feel like they can't. So keeping it in perspective not just helps in that regard, like you're saying, like it keeps your stress levels down, and that obviously has its own effect, but it gives you more of a sense that like you actually can take some action. You do have some agency in this case, which actually brings us to another question. Someone asked, is it too late to boost your immunity now since the virus is already here?
Not at all. Not at all. So I think there's other question about like diet, things that we can do. So I'm going to do some things that have nothing to do with supplements, just simple things we can do. First is literally staying hydrated. Because when the virus goes into your cell, the more water you have, what's called intracellular water, the more water you have in that cell, the healthier it is. The more difficult I believe it is. This is not fully proven yet, but I believe the harder it is for that virus to replicate itself. So I think staying hydrated is extremely important. I think, again, I mentioned, I think that's why in the elderly you tend to see them more susceptible to viruses because they're all dehydrated. Like who's drinking any water? So that's a huge thing. The other thing is, and Allison, you've heard me preach this over and over and over, is literally going outside and getting natural light. Everybody says that sounds really crunchy granola. That's not really medicine. But the research actually shows just the opposite. That is probably one of the most important things we could do. And this was someone got the Nobel Prize in this a few years ago. We have a thing called the clock gene. And this gene exists in every single cell of our body. So if we never go outside, we're stuck inside a house, we look at screens, TVs, cell phones, that clock gene never gets turned on. And that clock gene has direct receptors to what are called like Th1 and Th2 immune system to our white blood cells. Totally connects all of our immune system to light. So if you want to stay healthy, I would say go outside in the morning, get 15 minutes of natural light, go out at noon, get another 10 or 15 minutes, and by the afternoon, go out and get another 10 or 15 minutes. And it's important because we have no ultraviolet light right now. It's gray and rainy, right? That's what it's doing today. But it doesn't matter because you are going outside and you're letting your eyes and your skin bring in that natural light. And that's going to sync your own immune system to know that you are in a low ultraviolet or a low sunlit environment. And that resyncs your entire nervous system. I mean, why do people get sick during the winter and not the summer? I honestly think a lot of it has to do with the light, but staying inside like this is only making us much worse. So literally going outside a few times a day will help your immune system tremendously.
Another thing I've heard you talk about is the electrons you get from having contact with the actual ground. I just got back from California where I spent some time laying on the beach. I read it in your book, shameless plug, Perpetual Energy, which you can get on Amazon, right? So
Right. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that, about just, not just being out under the light, but having an actual physical relationship with the earth.
Right. Well, let me tie this back to the earth and to vitamin C. Remember I said when someone gets sick, what are we really dying of? What are we getting sick? So when you have a strep throat, when you see your throat all red, that's not the strep bacteria. That's actually the inflammatory process. That's what hurts you. That's why you see it red. And what that is, it's actually you are losing electrons. So I'll back up for a second. In our body, we have an electrical charge. We're electrical beings. So we have, for the most, this is a little oversimplification, right? But we have a positive and a negative charge. The negative are electrons, the positive are protons. We absolutely need both. So it isn't one is necessarily better than the other, but an electron is the anti-inflammatory process of our body. So essentially what I said in the book, the more electrons, the healthier we're going to be. So that goes back to vitamin C. Why does vitamin C work so well? Because vitamin C actually donates more electrons to your body. And so it's actually bringing that inflammatory process, not because vitamin C is something amazing, it's donating electrons. Well, the earth is a reservoir of these electrons. Physicists knew this a long time ago. Russians have known this for years. So when you put your bare feet on the ground, you are literally absorbing electrons from the earth into your body, which has a strong anti-inflammatory effect. So that's why when people go outside on the beach, they feel so great. They're going barefoot. They're picking up electrons from the sun. They're picking up electrons from the earth. And so that's why that has such a great anti-inflammatory effect.
It's definitely relates to this channel that I started a little over, well, actually almost 2 years ago to document our journey moving from city life to more country living. And that's part of it, because some people might say, why is Allison, on her Airstream renovation channel talking about coronavirus? But I really do think returning to these ideas that maybe have been lost through, technology and pharmaceuticals and everything, that there are just these very basic ways that we can stay healthy as humans, like knowing your farmers and eating healthier and getting some natural light. And all these things are actually cheaper and some totally free than the really expensive fads that we hear about often. And so it definitely is part and parcel with our journey to live just a more simple life. I want to go to another question. Somebody asked, with the vagueness of symptoms, how do we know when we should be seeking care? Is that primary care doctor or ER? For people of high risk, should we expect symptoms to be different? If necessary, how do we isolate ourselves if we have families?
Well, good question.
A lot of them.
The only way I could say this is you actually really have to go get tested. I mean, if you really want to know what you have the coronavirus, right? If you have that COVID-19, I would say, well, let me back up for that to a second, all right? That fever is really good. So obviously if someone is immunocompromised, if they have several health conditions going on, I believe they should go to the doctor right away. That's not a bad idea. If you're relatively healthy and you get a fever is actually what kills the virus. So, what's the ideal number that people could handle? I often say for adults, it's, 101 to 102. And we actually have a thing called a fever treatment. So I'll answer this question here in a second, but I just want to explain that fever is actually beneficial. When we get a fever, it's actually releasing a higher white blood cell count. It actually stops the virus from replicating. So that's what your body is doing. It is actually trying to raise your temperature. So we tell our patients, I was sick 2 weeks ago. I thought on a Thursday I had to go home and I was just completely exhausted, felt just terrible. This is what I tell our patients to do. I crawled into a hot bathtub at 5 p.m. I drank some very hot ginger tea, sat in the bathtub as hot as I could take it for 20 minutes, hopped out, put on 2 pairs of sweats, got underneath 5 blankets, and I had a fever all night long, but I slept through it. The next morning I got up at 4 o'clock and I went and worked a 14-hour day.
Wow.
Now, I should have been theoretically sick for 3 or 4 days, but I allowed the fever. So instead of taking, acetaminophen or something to bring down the fever, I wanted to actually bring it up at night. And that actually helps to kill the virus. So most people tend to keep their fever around, hey, it's getting a little high, let's take something to bring it down from 99, maybe 100 to something lower. But all you're doing is prolonging your infection. You're not bringing up, you're not getting those antibodies released to actually tag that virus and increase your immune system. So viruses run wonderful. Now, again, if someone as the caller was talking about, is that if you're immunocompromised, if you have some health condition, I'm not sure really what to tell you on that. I would say probably if your fever is getting up to 101, you should probably go seek medical treatment. I hope that answers the question.
No, I think that's good. And it kind of, we touched on this, so I'll ask it again because a different person asked it in sort of a different way. But if you're already immunocompromised, should you be doing something different, or does all this advice that you were just offering, does that sort of go across the board, or is there something different?
I would say it goes across the board. I would say the problem is that when someone says you're immunocompromised, I'm not exact. There's several things that could be happening. They could be having very low, like, white blood cell count. Like whenever, like, does someone get sick all the time? Immunocompromised could be someone who never really ever gets sick because their immune system can't actually mount an infection, and then they start developing other chronic diseases. So it's a little bit of, I'm not criticizing, it's just a little bit of a vague term. I guess for the moment, I'll just assume saying immunocompromised means that they tend to get a lot of infections and don't feel well all the time, or at least most of the time. And I would say with those people, I'd still kind of treat it with the vitamin A and going outside and getting a light and doing all those things.
Okay, and then I think this is our last one. Are those who have had a case of this and survived immune to getting it again?
Yes, but remember, viruses change rapidly. So we're saying this COVID-19, there's actually 23, so I don't want to bore people, but if you look at the coronavirus, there's 20, there's so many, it has this whole genome, like there's this whole genetic code. We're looking at one little snippet of that genetic code of the coronavirus. So you will build up an antigen to that virus. And theoretically, when that happens, that will spread to the other ones also, and it will give you some immune support to that.
I do have a question that kind of came up as I was listening to the press conference on Saturday, and I've seen this on social media as well, saying doctors saying, hey, one thing you could go do is get the flu vaccine. That to me is confusing because I know the flu vaccine isn't even always that effective with the flu itself, and so then add to coronavirus. Why would they be saying that, and what are your thoughts on that?
I have absolutely no idea why they're saying that.
Short answer.
I guess that's what I don't. It doesn't even make sense. I mean, why would it's a whole different virus unless it has a coronavirus and that vaccine? There's no point in it.
I mean,
that isn't the way a vaccine works. You have specific viruses in there that the whole vaccine is targeted to. It does not help you with any other viruses unless you actually took the one for that in that flu vaccine.
Is it possible that what they're getting at is, hey, you could help yourself with the flu so then you won't get both at the same time since it's flu season right now?
I guess so. I mean, it's possible. I'm not exactly sure why you would want to do that, but I mean, so you're getting into a whole other question, but so let's just, if we look at the flu vaccine, right? So a great thing called the Cochrane collaboration. They're the most independent group in the world that looks at studies done on different viruses or on medical, devices and different treatments that are done. And they said basically the flu vaccine is about 3% effective. And that's because of it's only selected to a few viruses, and viruses change all the time. They're changing almost every month, right? We have at least 200 circulating viruses right now in the United States that people are getting sick on. So you're only targeting just a couple. So it's going to be very hard to actually target a vaccine to that specifically.
I will say that I have not gotten the flu vaccine for probably at least a decade. I have not gotten the flu ever. And I even remember a time where I was working with a photographer in a live truck in very close proximity. He literally he came down with the flu while we were working together. I will say he was a little bit of I question his response. You know, he was, oh, I gotta sit in the passenger seat and I'm dying and everything, whatever. But so I took over for the day, which is it's fine. I was happy to do it. But it just goes to show he had gotten the vaccine and still got the flu. I had not gotten the vaccine. I didn't get the flu. And it's a reflection of like if your immune system is able to handle these viruses, because for sure I was exposed. But I do take a lot of care in like what I eat and the chemicals I use to clean my house and like I try to take inventory of that kind of stuff just to give my body the best shot. And just throwing myself out there, I'm sure there are people who would be like, why wouldn't you get the flu vaccine? But I mean, really, like the stuff you've talked about has seemed to be far more effective for me than that particular vaccine anyway. And it just shows the reality that there are all sorts of other things that maybe we take for granted that really do play a huge role in our immunity and our ability to deal with these diseases.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with getting sick. I mean, granted, I'm not sure if someone's immunocompromised and they're in a weakened state. But if you're a relatively healthy person, do you know in the studies that they've done that people who have more fever and like if they could look at how often someone gets sick, let's say every winter you get sick for like 2 days, right? There's nothing wrong with getting sick for a couple of days. Your body detoxifies, it purges all these, kind of bad bacteria, viruses from your body. It serves a purpose. And they know that people who have had like measles, mumps, and other infections, not from a vaccine, but actually had them, they have a much lower risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. They have a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. I mean, it goes on, and we never hear that in the press, do we? We don't ever hear about that. But there's been some great studies done by legitimate medical journals showing that when you are sick and have a fever, it actually improves your overall health outcome because a fever, like I said, serves a purpose. It's your body kind of cleaning itself out. You're increasing your immune system. It's functioning properly. So when you look at the flu vaccine, I would say even if you didn't get the flu vaccine, someone may get the flu. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think it serves a purpose. What you don't want to do is you want to see it go on for 1 to 2 weeks, and that does mean that there's something wrong with your body. But if someone gets sick for 2 days out of the winter or something, I think that serves a great purpose.
Is there anything else that you would like to add that I've not asked you about yet?
I could probably go on with other things to treat. The only thing I want to say is mushrooms are great.
Oh, my brother was hoping that you would talk about mushrooms.
Yeah, mushrooms are great. So go eat them. That's a great way. You can also get, right here in Washington, or I think it's right over in Olympia, Paul Stamets, right? He has My Community Mushrooms. Great. They're grown right here in Washington. He's got a great blend. I get no money out of this, but we use it in our office all the time. It's a wonderful blend of mushrooms. And so they actually help tremendously with your immune system. So I would he sells them, just go to his website. Again, I get no money out of this. It's called My Community Mushroom Extract. And I think that's a wonderful thing to help with your immune system. There's a ton of research on that showing how it affects your immune system, helps you stay healthy. The other thing I was going to say is like doing deep breathing is great. Meditation. I like to lie on the floor, breathe in for 4 seconds through my nose, hold it for 4, and blow out through 8 as hard as I can through my mouth to literally expel all the air out of my lungs. And you'll start coughing. And when you cough, you're expelling all of this, what I call kind of like reserved air, or what I call almost like dead air in your lungs. You're cleaning your whole lungs out. Doing that 5 or 6 times a day is a great way for your lungs to clean itself out and help with your immune system.
I, not too long ago, had a really, really bad headache, and I did exactly that breathing. And within probably an hour and a half, I had totally cured it. Because I'm pregnant and I like really trying to stay away from pain medications and stuff like that. And I'd never actually taken the time to monitor a issue I was having, do breathing, and do that test and see like does it actually make a difference. And it really did. And I don't know what the mechanics are behind that, but yeah, it definitely helped with that issue.
Yeah.
Well, David, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for talking about this. I know it's on a lot of people's minds, whether they're thinking everybody's nuts or whether they're really scared. Obviously, I know both of us, it's terrible to lose anybody. I'm sure for the families of the people who have died or the people who are sick, this has been a really sad and scary time. And so I think the least we can do is try to help people who are now hearing this news. Help their bodies do the best they can. And I really appreciate your taking the time to do that.
My pleasure.
Well, everybody, thanks again for watching. I'm Allison Morrow. If you like this video, please share it with people you think might benefit from it. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more off-grid-ish videos, whether they have to do with health or food or renovating an Airstream or just our family's moved off to a homestead we hope to build someday. And we will see you next time.